Yeah, no, I just realized I forgot to click something, which is why our video was not having as much audio for those who were watching the video stuff. So I'll have to fix that again later. But anyways, yeah, no, I feel like if the content that we are experiencing at the moment is something that is forgiving enough mechanically that you're able to one shot the seventh boss, that is 100% a benefit for the raid team, because what that means is we're not experiencing any gimmick fights where you're putting a lot of, I guess, responsibility that could wipe the raid on one random individual, right? That tends to be the thing that slows down a lot of this stuff, is when there's sort of like a gimmick or a mechanic that puts a lot of individual onus on a player. And this is what a lot of the conversation happened last expansion in Shadowlands around a lot of their raids, is there was a lot of mechanics out there that put a huge amount of onus on individual responsibility to the player, where if that messed up, you would just wipe, which is bad, in my opinion, to do that in
it's a morale
fights,
killer. It's
right?
not fun. Yeah, and like you have that person who like just can't handle it, and then like of course they get the mechanic, then everybody gets mad at them, and it's like it's not really their fault, but it does suck. But it's just that's like not a good place to put people in. There is some stuff like that in this raid, but it's way more forgiving than like Anduin was, for example. I mean, it's just I think that's the fight to keep going back to, because it was a cool design and it was like it told a great story. It could have been such a good fight, but the tuning just ruined it. Unfortunately, it'll be something we remember, like with this game and with rating forever, because of how overtuned and ridiculous it was, and it took what was such a cool like paper design for a boss and just made it a thing that I think a lot of teams dreaded from week to week.
Yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate when you run into too many bosses like that. And I think it's fine to do it. I think it's fine to have gimmick fights, and it's fine to have fights that are challenging and to put out content that does have individual responsibility. The issue is when too many bosses have it. That's where you start to see the burnout happening on raid teams,
Right,
where
right.
you just have too many bosses too close together, or just inside the same raid tier, that involve every player needing to know how to do one thing very correctly. And the moment any of them mess it up, that's it. You're over. It's done. And that's the more of those mechanics you add into an encounter, aka Painsmith, as an example there, the more mechanics that have personal responsibility for saving your life or causing the entire raid to wipe that you put into a boss, the more likely it is for people to struggle on that boss. And when it comes down to it, if they're avoiding those mechanics, or only putting, a few in here or there, or only putting, one in every three bosses, then great. I think it's what they need to sort of get people back into enjoying the content they're playing. Because that's where you talk about getting into a race with these top end teams as a raid designer and as a developer, is okay, we're going to put in 3 or 4 of these into the same encounter. And then the next encounter is going to have 2, and the encounter after that's going to have another 3 or 4. And you're like, okay, you are designing a very challenging raid, but that also means that all the people who are not in that top 200 people who are playing the game at that level of the game are going to have a really bad experience. And are you okay with that? And at the time, they just weren't thinking, I guess, about those other
Yeah.
people who play the game. They only were designing raid content for that top 200 people. And that's unfortunate. And they recognize that it's a mistake, and they've admitted that it was a mistake. So I'm glad that we are on this path towards, hopefully revitalizing the raiding scene that has been dying. It's been in a
Yeah.
really rough shape.
Yeah, like I don't really think that there shouldn't be fights that are difficult or that have complexity. I just don't think every fight should be like that, and or it shouldn't feel that way anyway. Where like you walk away from a raid night just kind of frustrated. Like I think the ebb and flow and different pacing is important in a raid. You should have like a ramp up boss in terms of complexity, and then maybe like you cool down a little bit until you get into an even more complex boss. And that's kind of how this raid works. Like going from Ziskarn, which is it doesn't have a lot of layers, but everything interacts in really dangerous ways. That's a pretty intense fight, and I think it's actually the hardest fight of the first 8 on heroic. And then you ramp down pretty significantly into Magmorax, which is basically a big pile of health, and then you have a much more complex fight in Echo and Eltharion. I like that. I like that overall much better than just every single boss gets harder and more punishing. I mean, you don't want to have those roadblocks early on, but like Anduin was kind of the same way, because after that you had Lords of Dread and you had Rygalon, which were simpler fights overall and relatively smoother to re-clear week to week because you didn't have those elements. So I'm not saying everything should be patchwork and everything should fall over if you have enough gear, but having some variety and having bosses that feel like they're playing fair, I think is it's just really working for me right now. I'm really enjoying this raid, and I think they've done a great job with Dragonflight raiding so far. And I hope this is just a blueprint going forward. You know, this is what I want raiding to feel like.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of mechanics that allow your raid team to choose who's going to deal with the complex, crazy thing. Having, someone has to draw runes way back in, Legion days. Okay, well, we can choose who actually goes and does that task to run on the floor and draw the runes that they have to draw, right? Someone has to, take over and drive this vehicle. Okay, well, we can choose who's going to drive what vehicles and what they're going to be doing with this vehicle thing that they're doing. That allows raid teams to get people who know how to do those things or who are better at doing those things, or even just create a learning curve for just one player to learn how to do those things. And allows for a better raid experience overall, because that's kind of where I struggle, is where it's, you know what, you have, in your case, 30 people on your raid team, and this is a mechanic where any of those 30 or even any of those 28, if you're going to take tanks out of it, could get chosen to do this thing. And so, which means you have to essentially wait until all 28 people have figured out how to do this thing, and there's going to be people who are good at it and going to be people who aren't, and people who don't get it at all and they're never going to be good at it. And yeah, it's a struggle. So I've always been in favor of, yes, you can put in complex mechanics or gimmicks or things like that, but let there be the guy who kicks the turtle shells, right? Let there be the guy who's assigned to do that task. There's been so many times over the years where they've designed raids that have had really fun, interesting mechanics where, all right, we're going to have Ed do that. Ed always does this. He's the guy we can rely on for doing this thing for this boss. When he's not there that week, hey, you know what? Everyone understands that, Joe, who's going to do it this week, might not be as good at it and is going to be learning. So there's this forgiveness that happens, when that's happening. It also makes everyone really value when Ed's in the raid. So, I appreciate that. I that's what I want out of those mechanics. I want less, hey, you know what? It's just random. Someone gets chosen and that person has to know how to do this, or you wipe. And if you're going to do that, do it on very few bosses, because otherwise it's not a fun experience for the raid, because you have to remember how many people you're playing with and how hard it is to organize a group of people like that, and how much stuff people have going on in their lives around them. The amount of times I've been raiding and someone's commenting on the, sporting event that's happening, and I've been like, dude, we're in the middle of a boss pull. Like, you should be focused on this. What are you doing? Right?
Let's shut the other monitor off maybe for just for
5 minutes. Here, Give me 5 minutes of your focus so that we can kill this boss and move on to the next thing. I don't care if you watch it during trash. Let's do this. That is, the mentality that we end up with. Oh, all right. So we sort of went off on a raiding tangent there for a bit. But
that's okay. That's what we do. We're raiders here, so yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about dungeons really quick, because I think dungeons are feeling great in my opinion. I'm not done with dungeons after 2 weeks, but like there's a lot to learn because we got a big pool. We got 8 new dungeons that we haven't seen on Keystone ever, or at least in this current form. So I'm still learning things every night I step in there. I don't have Keystone Master yet because I haven't done every dungeon on both Tyrannical and Fort Flavors, but I would easily have it had I done that. I just haven't really been putting the time in. I've been doing like 8 and that's it, and just kind of going for whatever key anybody wants to do.
Yeah.
But man, last week was our first look at Entangling, and that's exactly what I want out of an affix. It's, it's very simple to play around. It makes you do a thing you don't want to do every once in a while, but you have counterplay if you have like a snare breaker or something. I really didn't. There were a couple situations where it was like, I don't really want to back up like 8 yards from here because I'm afraid of pulling this pack that I'm trying to avoid or something. But, the positioning and stuff is it's a consideration you have to take in mind when you're doing dungeons, especially if you're tanking and setting up the pools and setting up where combat's going to be. So I thought it was fine. It felt natural to deal with. I'm not missing the seasonal affix concept at all. Even without, some kind of boon or like some kind of power I'm getting from it. Like Thundering never felt that great anyway. And I feel like the new affixes, and we'll talk about another one that's debuting this week. Like, I don't feel like they're adding too much complexity and that they're presenting plenty of options for counterplay. So, I'm really enjoying it so far. I wish I had more time to do more dungeons, but again, it's hard to get people together when it's not WoW time, and there's a lot of other stuff competing for my time these days. I know we'll be in this season for months, so like I'm not really I'm not going like super ham the first couple weeks. Like I'm kind of taking it as it comes, but It is, I think the way it all works is really great, especially with how it ties into the item upgrade system. I managed to get enough 16 pluses under my belt to finally get 4 aspect crests actually last night.
Oh,
So I got my crafted shield up to 447. It cost me like 10k gold worth of mats to get the enchanted crest made, but like I now have a maxed out shield with an even haste verse split for the rest of the season. I'm done with the most important
checked
part of
off
my
your
gear.
list. Gotcha.
It feels amazing. I got 4-piece for the new set. I completed 4-piece last night, so I haven't gone up too much in item level. I'm only like 427 or something, but like I'm starting to feel those upgrades as I get the set bonus online and some of the key pieces start getting upgraded. And once we get to the point where we're kind of focusing more on heroic, maybe dabbling in mythic, like consistently doing like 18 pluses, that stuff's going to take off, I think, as I get into that mode where it's like, well, I really just need aspect crests, and I'm getting aspect crests like hand over fist, and I'll be like really utilizing the upgrade system, and that power is just going to continue to trend upwards. So that feels really nice. And the other big thing is, I've talked for a while about how I've been diligent about professions as much as I possibly can be. Last week I maxed out mining knowledge, so I'm done with mining. There's nothing new for me to apply points into.
Nice.
Which feels nice. The weird thing is you still get points. So I don't know, like if they add stuff in the future, will I be able to use my bank points on the new stuff? Maybe.
Yeah.
And I maxed out armor smithing, which is the biggest subtree in blacksmithing. Like you can make like one of every piece of armor basically, except cloaks. So that was a lot of stuff to learn. There's a ton of skill points to put in there, or knowledge points, I guess you would say. So I can pretty much like guarantee 5-star crafts on any piece of plate armor. And now I'm like moving on to max out the other smaller trees. And it just feels so good. Like I mean, I'm limited a bit by sparks, but it's like I know that as time goes on, if I need to fill in a piece, I'll be able to put a 447 wherever I want to in terms of my armor, which is like, I mean, that's incredible. Like all it takes is just consistent, effort with the game to like do high level keystones and put the time into doing the professions, and you get this massive payoff. And there's no variance. There's no, bad luck factor. Like you just do it and you get the crest fragments from doing it. And then you convert all of your time and effort with the game and your expertise at it into just top level, absolutely top rank character power. Like I'm so thrilled with the way the system has carried forward, and that the way the item upgrade system feels early on in the season. I think it's a huge boon to the game, to not feel like you're beholden to random drops just to have your character be powerful. Like, yes, there's stuff that you want that drops randomly. That makes the content exciting to do. It can make it frustrating if you don't get what you want, but it's like, if you go the route that I've gone, you won't end up in a spot where it's like you can't get to a certain power plateau, because you just have to put the time in to get what you need.
Yeah. I put a lot of time into herbing this past week. I just had a lot of time where I was doing other things and could kind of mindlessly fly around and herb. And it was a very surprising thing of just how much knowledge I was able to gain just passively by just herbing consistently for a few hours. And yeah, it really is just time based, which I've always enjoyed that aspect of the game, when there were things in there you could just grind out. That's just part of, the game that I enjoy a lot, especially if there are large distributions of those, considering something like a weekly quest, or, even daily quests or world quests that give you a larger contribution towards that grind. And then if you choose to spend your downtime outside of those quests and doing even more farming on your own at a more reduced rate, getting that reward factor in for whatever currency or whatever it is, power gain you're trying to get, that's something I've always enjoyed. Simply because it means whatever I'm doing in the world, I can choose to do something that makes me feel like I'm making my character better in some way. My character's learning something or is becoming more powerful in some way. So I like systems like this, and I want more systems like this. They've put them in over the years in a lot of different forms, and they have always been something that's sort of abandoned from one expansion to the next, and I want stuff like this to carry over. So we know that the profession thing is something that they planned on redesigning and carrying forward, so I'm excited to see how this carries forward. As you talked about, what happens when they release new things, how those trees branch out, what that whole system is going to look like. I would like it if there wasn't some sort of profession reset that happened every single expansion. I would like it if, you learning everything you need to know about armor smithing means that next expansion, there's very little work you need to do to be able to master the new sets of armor that are out there. Because I would not want to be an entire reset on the system where you then had to spend the, first, where we're at, 8 months of the expansion grinding out your profession every single day. That I don't think anyone would enjoy. So I'm hoping a lot of this carries forward.
Yeah, I mean, it feels so intrinsic to your character, and I think that's really the brilliant part about the profession rework was they're deep, complex reworks of the idea of what a profession is, and it feels like almost as much a part of your character as your class. And yeah, I mean, I could see maybe like, okay, we're gonna need new skills for maybe collecting new materials, new recipes for, especially for unique things like like the unstable frostfire belt or something, right? You have to get like this certain level of being able to make belts to make like the cool one that has the proc.
Yeah.
So, maybe I hopefully that it's not a big reset button and it's like, well, okay, you can make all this cool Dragonflight stuff, but in order to make expansion 10 stuff, like you're gonna have to fill out this entire other tree. Like now I think like adding an expansion specific layer onto it where it's like, okay, I carry this knowledge forward that like benefits me, but then I need to learn like specific things. Hopefully they can kind of weave their way in that direction.
Yeah, I would
if you put the work in Dragonflight, the goalposts are a little bit closer for when they expand it.
I would like to see the limitation, sort of the gating that takes place on crafting next expansion, be something that is based around materials and how long it takes for you to gather and gain those materials. Things like, you're talking about having enough aspects tokens to be able to actually make this piece of gear, right? Limit it that way. So yes, right off the bat, you know how to make now a 587 eye level piece of gear, right? At the start of the next expansion. You already know how to make it. But the issue is gathering the materials to do that and putting the materials together to do that is time gated. So it's going to take you a couple of months to do that. And that's why you can't just get a, immediate top end mythic piece of gear, on week 1 of the expansion coming out. It's something where it's like, no, it's going to take you 8 weeks or 6 weeks to be able to put that piece of gear together because of time gating on being able to acquire the materials to do it. That I'd rather see than be putting everyone in a situation where it's like, no, you just thought you knew how to make armor. This is armor now, and now you have to learn how to make this armor because it's totally, totally different than all this other armor that you have been making up to this point. I don't mind having skill trees to integrate, new materials that are found inside whatever region we go to. I just dislike if it's like, no, it's a big reset button, and you essentially have to start from scratch learning stuff over. So I'm hoping they, take a look at their history as far as what's happened with gating on items and apply that to professions, and that's how they control a massive flow of a huge amount of high-level mythic crafted gear from going out there to players is simply by limiting, or gating the materials that are used to make them. Okay. I did an underwrite last week. I did an 18 key, so I made sure that I got a really nice reward, which I did.
Nice.
A week ago, I got myself a belt, which was kind of meh, but, whatever. It was something. And I think it was 424 or 4, something like that. This week, because it's an 18, I got a 444, and it was a two-handed mace. So my weapon is, like, good for a while. I don't really have to worry about that for a very long time.
You might be done. You might just be done. It's entirely possible the weapon is done now, yeah.
So I'm pretty thrilled about that. It was also Haste Mastery, which is my, ideal stats for Boomy, but it's also partially good stats as well, especially if I'm doing Mythic Plus for Resto. So that was really nice. So that's perfect. And the coolest part about it, the thing I love about this, is I love two-handed maces for casters, because there's some really neat transmog out there that you can apply to two-handed maces that you can't apply to staves or, anything else. So I love whenever I get to, actually roll around with one of these things, because there's some really fun transmog for it. So yeah, I got pumped about that.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a really nice rip for week 2 for sure.
Yeah. Outside of that, I did a lot of sniff and seeking. And sniff and seeking is a really great way to get gear if someone hasn't figured that one out yet. If you're someone who's just starting out on a character or trying to find a way to get a character geared up, you can do things like buying up crafted gear off of the auction house and then dumping tokens into it to try and crank up those levels on it. But Sniff and Seeking also rewards like 415, 405, 408, that's what it is, eye level gear that you can get. And it doesn't cost a lot of those trade tokens to get a map. It's like 5 trade tokens to get a map. So you can essentially get into a cycle where you're earning those tokens, trading them in, getting a map, going to him, doing a dig, getting a 405 piece, and just repeat that until you actually gear out a lot of pieces on your character, which is pretty neat. So if you're someone who's looking for a tip on getting some eye level up, that's another great way to do it. And be sure you're doing that. So yeah, okay. Hopping into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, this week is the Cataclysm Time Walking event, and that means that Cataclysm reputation gains from combat and quests are increased by 50%, and of course, characters who are of the appropriate eye level, I think it's 50 and above, it could be 60 and above now, can actually head out there.
It's 60,
It's
yeah.
60? Yeah, 60 and above now. Can actually head out there and do End Time, Blackrock Caverns, Lost City of Tol'vir, Stonecore, Vortex Pinnacle, or Throne of Tides on Time Walking, and get yourself some 385 gear, actually just dropping for those dungeons, or 372 from the tokens, the vendor you can go to trade tokens for. And there is a quest to complete 5 of these dungeons, or, and this was new text, I noticed this week, or kill 5 time walking bosses. And I was like, oh. So if you wanted to go and do Time Walking Firelands, for example, which you can do with a group of 10 to 30 players, and it drops 415 eye level loot, you can essentially get the reward just for killing 5 of those bosses. So like one raid night with your raid team gets you a bunch of, normal eye level gear at 415, basically. And you can then go and turn in to get an additional normal new raid, Aberrus loot from killing those 5 bosses. So it's a pretty cool little reward that they have going on with that. I'm glad this was, I don't know if this was added a month ago or 2 months ago, but it's definitely text I noticed this week and was like, ooh, I got to make sure I mention that.
Yeah, I think it came in semi recently. Like, this isn't the first time it's been in, but it. I mean, we also don't have a raid for every time walking event either. So
Yeah.
it's not an option for each time we have it. But yeah, the other thing too is like, yeah, you can get 415 item level loot out of Time Walking Firelands.
Yeah.
And so then, you'll get the drops, and then everybody can get a guaranteed piece if you go do this. Plus, the time walking drops are, again, they're normal raid equivalent, so that means they have an upgrade track, so you can upgrade them with crests and everything. This could be a really good option, like if you're kind of a casual team and you're chunking through Aberrus and you want some other stuff to do. Like, yeah, normally when we have a time walking raid this early in the season, it's like, well, this is maybe pointless because it's just not going to be worth your attention versus, the fresh loot and everything in the new raid and whatever. But I could see cases where Firelands might be really preferable for some teams this week, especially, if you're moving through Aberrus faster than your normal schedule, like the way my team has been. I mean, again, you do have a holiday weekend in the States and everything, so it might be a little bit less time to play overall. But yeah, I think this is actually interesting timing on this event. I probably should do the time walking and just roll the dice with what I get out of the cash, but I don't know. I mean, I never seem to have good luck with that, and it's always like, why did I just do any of that? Like, I didn't really have fun, and the only thing I got to show for it was this cloak I'm going to vendor. I don't know. I might end up doing it anyway, but it's definitely a good thing to do. Like, it's a thing to put on the list this week for sure, but yeah. I just have my own kind of hang up with it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, yeah, a little unfortunate timing with the holiday, but I think this is probably like one of the more exciting early season time walking events with a raid attach that we've had maybe like ever, because of the upgrade potential and all that. Like, you could really start decking out your normal team if that's where you're at.
Yeah, it certainly is a great way to get a bunch of people very geared up very quickly. So definitely, I mean, just think about the fact that Jason's only like 427 eye level or whatever it is, and you can catch right up to being within 10 eye levels of him just by, running through Firelands once. You could potentially have characters get fully geared out based off of the amount of loot that comes out of there. So keep it in mind. All right, this week, Aiding the Accord is going on, which means getting 3K rep with with I guess some of the factions. Doesn't matter which one. You just have to get 3K reputation inside of Dragonflight. And participate in an activity. And the activity is going to be assigned to you when you actually go and talk to the NPC who's handing it all out. We basically have confirmed at this point that it is just random which one you get, whether you get the hunt or you get to, go and stop the invasion, or you're helping support the researchers, or, whatever it is that they have you going, or doing a sniff and seek, whatever it is they have you going to go do. It's just a random thing that's not even account based. So we don't really understand why they chose to do that. It seems odd to me because this is a massively multiplayer online game and people tend to play it with their friends. And if everyone gets a different activity to do, you can't do them together unless it's just not benefiting someone. So that's weird to me. But
and most of them are based around like the public events, right? Like sniff and seeking isn't, but like most of the other ones are based around some multiplayer thing out in the world. I don't know. I mean, I guess all we can say at this point is when you log in on Tuesday, talk to the NPC and get the quest and go from there. I so far we haven't been able to establish any kind of a pattern as to how this stuff gets assigned out.
Fighting is your own reward is still up. The complete 5 heroic dungeons. It seems like that's probably just going to be the standard through this at least this patch, where it rewards a 415 eye level trophy chest or 15 Drake's Shadowflame crest fragments, which gets you 1 Drake's Shadowflame crest. Which also rewards 250 reputation to all 5 major factions. So this is a great way to get that reputation as well, because you essentially get 1,250 rep just right off the bat by doing this one. Fighting is its own reward. You get a 415 piece, or you get the Drake's crest instead if you don't want the 415 piece, and you just get 1,250 rep. So big way to contribute towards that Aiding the Accord if it's something you want to do. I'm curious about, because they also have obviously the one for Loam down underground, where you have to get yourself some more reputation towards their faction throughout the week, and you get a reward from that. And that reward can also be a 405 or a 408 piece of loot, which is pretty nice for the week. But I'm curious if these sorts of events where you accumulate reputation on a weekly basis is something that is to help people recognize just how much reputation you get regularly and how easy it is to get reputation, because everyone talks about rep grinds and not being a very pleasurable thing to do. Whereas in this case, if everyone's recognizing how easy or quick it is to get reputation inside an expansion regularly, because they can finish their Aiding the Accord quest in a day, and that's not a difficult thing to do. I'm wondering if that mentally is making things easier for people. I don't know what the purpose was in putting in those reputation limits, other than obviously forcing people to actually do some sort of reputation grind. But I'm hoping that the psychological effect is a positive one, I guess is what I'm going for.
Yeah, I guess it's just like a way they can put in sort of a milestone for like how much single player max level outdoor content that you did to earn a reward or something. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Rep is such a different thing for the most part these days than it was years ago. I mean, you had Cobalt Assembly in 10.0, which was, that was pretty grindy, and Obsidian Citadel was pretty grindy, but they were very optional. And, the renown system is weird because it's good. Like I like the way that it works, and I think it's been a nice shift away for like the main storylines and stuff in Dragonflight, where you can work on 4 and now 5 of them all at your own pace, kind of. But it's sort of a fancy time gate. It's a flexible time gate in a way, because the idea is like, we'll like front load you with reputation earlier in the week, and then if you want to grind more, then you can, and then you'll get to the end of this process earlier than you would if you didn't. But if you just kind of go with the flow, then you'll end up there anyway. So I mean, it works out, I think, pretty nicely compared to days of yore, where it was like, okay, go to this area, kill these particular mobs, wait for them to drop these items, turn them into a vendor, and then get rep. Or like, put on a tabard and go grind dungeon mobs until the bar fills up. Like, this is much more flexible, but in a lot of ways, it also is like, I mean, the Legion time gating, like with the various questing and stuff around, artifact knowledge and your class campaigns and like Suramar. As much as I love Legion, there was a lot of stuff with time gating where it was like you couldn't do exactly what you wanted to do. You had to do this specific thing at this time and then wait for the next part to happen. This is more flexible, but only to a certain degree, because once you get through that kind of front-loaded amount of rep that's available to you, it starts tapering off a lot. So
yeah,
it's okay. I mean, I think the big thing is, especially at this point in the expansion, it's like, I don't know, man. There's if all you want to do is raid, PvP, dungeon, like I don't. What do you really need rep for? That's going to impact your goals in those areas. Like I don't. They're cool, and there's a lot of nice cosmetics and like nice features and little things you unlock as you go through it. Cosmetics, like that's cool. It's like nice story questing. Like it's a good system, but it's not going to hold you back from like, I don't know, getting plus 20s or like mythic rating or doing high end PvP. Versus like the conduit unlocks and upgrades and stuff that were like time gated in Shadowlands, for example. It's just not used like that anymore. So. It's cool to have, but it's not like something you got to really zero in on.
Yeah, I still find putting quest content, as much as it in an RP world, it makes sense that as a faction trusts you more, there may be developments that occur that they want you to be involved in, where they might have not wanted you involved in before if they didn't trust you as much. I understand that RP perspective of the questing content. I still find that it's a weird gate to have for a player who's like, hey, I'm just going to hop into this expansion 2 patches in, 3 patches into the expansion, whatever it is, and try and catch up and have fun with it, where a lot of the content is just locked. And sorry, if unless you play the game every day, 7 days a week for the next 3 weeks, and do nothing but rep grinding for these factions whenever it's available, you're not going to be able to see the full story of that, it's just weird to lock story that way, right? I just find it strange. I wish that there was accelerated paths to get those quests unlocked, or maybe they have plans later in the expansion to just have skips for reputation that just go, hey, you know what? Yep, we're just going to essentially do what we did with Renown, where it's like, hey, here's something you can just use on your character that then completes all of your reputation gains. You get all the rewards immediately, and now you can actually go and do all the quest chain. Because it seems odd to me that there'll be a situation where players eventually just don't have the time this expansion to explore the stories that are in this expansion that they put effort and time into, if they didn't put the effort into grinding reputation for it. So yeah, I mean,
at some point they probably need like a big catch up or something on the older Renowns. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they didn't do one with 10.1, but maybe at some point. Yeah. I think it would probably be necessary, especially if they add like a 10.2 faction or something. By the time we get like late in the process, there's going to need to be a way to speed it up just to get all the feature unlocks and all the story questing. Yeah.
Well, the story quest to me is just so important. I mean, we've, when we had Ben and John and a lot of other people in the community that we talk with regularly, the biggest frustration they always suffered from was, I don't want to have to raid in order to find out what's happening with the story. And I feel like too much of the story is locked behind this one activity, right? And I find it strange to me that the activity that they're locking story content behind now is actually harder than the raid content. You can't just hop into LFR and suddenly see the entire, unlock all of those Renown levels and be able to see all that story, right? Whereas you can do that with the story content that was happening in Raid. You can go into an LFR, see what you were missing out story-wise, complete those quest chains, and actually, finish off the story. And you can do that in a week. Late in the expansion, you could just log in and go, yep, I'm going to do LFR this week and be able to get the entire story content that I want to and progress through the whole story. Whereas in this situation with gating storyline behind reputation, you can't do that. It's going to take months of regular playing the game to be able to get maxed out Valdrakken Accord rep and be able to see the whole Valdrakken story. That seems really strange to me, right? It just is. It's just a weird thing. Anyway.
Now we'll talk more in a couple minutes about gated story questing content.
We will, indeed. Yes, we will. Okay. PvP quests for the week are arena skirmishes and rated arenas. The PvP brawl is Deep 6, where essentially there's 6 players versus 6 players that happen on Warsong Gulch, Silver Shard Mines, and Temple of Kot Magu, and they sort of vary up the rules to let players have a little bit more fun with a smaller group amount, which is like only 2 orbs on Temple of Kot Magu, or there's less carts to track on Silver Shard Mines, or the flags are actually closer on Warsong Gulch. So there's just some weird little twists that they throw in there. It's a decent brawl. If you got some buddies together, it's actually a pretty fun one to do for a smaller group content. I've always enjoyed smaller group content. So Deep Six is out there. Weekly World Boss, of course, is the Zakali Elders, the big Dejarin duo down in Zaralek Cavern that you can knock out. And they're dropping some 415 eye-level loot for you. I have yet to get any loot off of a World Boss this expansion, which seems very strange to me. I've killed many World Bosses. I have gotten 0 loot off of any World Boss this expansion. But, is what it is. That's the chance of all this sort of thing. The World Boss that's dropping 395 loot this week is Liskanoth, the Future Bane, the Big Ice Proto-Dragon up in Thaldraszus. And as far as Mythic Plus goes, we got Tyrannical, Incorporeal, and Spiteful. And so this means bosses have more health and deal increased damage. And while in combat, incorporeal beings periodically appear and attempt to weaken players by casting a spell. And spiteful fiends will rise from the corpses of non-boss enemies and pursue random players. I think I'm going to officially call this Spooky Week because it's all the spookiness. There's ghosts and incorporeal beings and all sorts of stuff chasing you around. So, incorporeal, for those who don't know, the spell that they cast reduces the damage and healing that you do by 50%. So it's just a huge reduction on players. And Jason told me that this stacks. So,
Yeah, you can get 2 of them at once, and you can be doing 100% less damage and healing. So you're doing literally nothing until it wears off.
Yep. So you need to interrupt these in their casts, but there's some twists. And Jason, I'll let you divulge the twist.
Yeah. So there, I have some good news about Incorporeal is that it's highly manageable, because the incorporeal beings, for some reason, there's something weird going on with them in terms of their state of
existence
in incorporeality. They can be interrupted and they can be hard and soft CC'd, but they cannot take damage. What this means is you can hard CC this when it pops, and it will just stay hard CC'd until it expires. It's great. The other thing is, as soon as you drop combat, they despawn. So if they pop like right near the end of combat, frequently last night I was doing a couple keys and we'd be cleaning up spiteful ads, right? Because, they pop as stuff dies. Then the incorporeal timer would pop and the incorporeal thing would come up like as we were killing a spiteful ad, and then it would just despawn before we even did anything to it. It is kind of an annoying interaction because you are in combat longer than you want to be.
Yeah.
Incorporeal spiteful seems weird at first until you do it for a while and you sort of end up in this rhythm where you're constantly trying to clean up spitefuls to get incorporeals to despawn. So it is, it is a bit sloggy, especially on a tyrannical week where you're trying to move through the trash quickly. But I wasn't really sure what incorporeal was going to feel like when we were hearing about it on PTR and stuff, and when they were kind of selling it to us in the blue post. But highly counterplayable. Interrupt them, stun them, or hard CC them, and then you don't have to worry about it. If you have a warlock, you can like banish one and chain fear the other one. And I know your warlock would prefer to be killing stuff, but your warlock would also probably not prefer to be doing 100% reduced damage. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I so far, again, this is another new affix that I feel like doesn't really stack up a ton of complexity, but also offers you a lot of opportunities to counterplay. There's a lot of different ways you can approach what to do with incorporeal spawns based on your group comp and everything. So I like it. I mean, it didn't seem too terrible to me last night, except for I think they like spawn near players. So if your group tends to get really spaced out on like a boss fight or something, then you may not be able to have everybody help and participate when the incorporeals pop. And it might be hard for like a single player to deal with 2 of them at once. So that's maybe the only consideration is like watch positioning. Don't end up like 80 yards apart where it's going to be impossible to close the gap and help out if they pop. But yeah, I don't know. I like it. I like it. So far, I like the stuff they added a lot better than the stuff that they took out. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah. I'm kind of excited about the whole thing when it comes to that. Sorry. So next up, we have the I guess this is the only way to say is the Diablo 4 tie-in event that's happening. Diablo 4 is officially launching early release on June 1st, and it comes out June 6th worldwide. The early release just being people who pre-ordered the big special fancy edition get in. And so there's a greedy emissary. It's going to be a particular event where a strange wind blew in from another world, and sightings of odd bag-holding creatures are spotted in the lands. In other words, there's going to be treasure goblins inside World of Warcraft, and you're going to go around and beat them up and see what treasure they have. There is a Nightmare banner toy that you can get that is essentially a toy that I assume puts a banner on your back, just like you'd have inside Diablo. So if you want to run around with a fancy terror banner on your back, you can do that. You basically fight treasure goblins and get Diablo-themed cosmetic loot, but it's not just that. There's actually some other things tied into it. There's charms, which I'm assuming are either only available during the event, or there's something that is going to be like a buff that's a temporary buff that you right-click on and applies to your character, as opposed to being something that sits in your inventory and consistently gives you benefit, like inside Diablo. Because there's ones that, like, increase your intellect by 100, which just seems like, cheating if you can participate in this event and get a bunch of charms, right?
I mean, we don't know exactly how this is going to play out. My assumption is there's going to be like an area that we go to participate in this, and that the charms are useful there. But really, like, other than the fact that it's on the calendar, we don't know anything about how it's going to play right now. It's going to start tomorrow, but this is what we can kind of glean from what's been data mined, So I got a feeling the charms might, think of like, I don't know, like Ungoro Madness, you get those like temporary buffs while you're doing the thing. It might be like that, where it's like you can use them to do the event, but I don't think you're going to be like stocking up on them and bringing them into Aberrus. That's probably not the goal, but yeah, I mean, there's going to be, it seems like, there will be some area where we have to go fight stuff and we can get buffs and get cosmetics from having, winning the fights while we're buffed.
Yeah, I will say the data mined items that we've seen of these charms requires a greedy emissary, which typically you'd see in something that requires a particular event to be taking place. I'm assuming these also don't apply inside dungeons and raids. It's probably just outdoor world is what they apply in. But yeah, you can get like 100 intellect, you can get 12,000 more mana, you can get 100 agility, you can get 300 more stamina, 100 strength, 200 more armor, and 1% movement speed. And presumably these things stack like they would inside Diablo. So if you get a whole bunch of them, then you're just ultra powerful running around filling up a bunch of your bag with these big charms that you can sort of run around with gaining benefit from. So it could be something where outdoor world content for this period of time, it runs from May 25th until June 14th. Could just be something where outdoor world stuff is wacky because players are just super ultra buffed by having a whole bunch of charms on them. We don't know. So yeah, we'll report back once we've actually seen this and seen how it works and see what's going on with it. There's another thing going on though, the Winds of Sanctuary, which increase experience gain by 50% and increases all reputations except the Loam Niffin, which again, really, by 8%. So everyone gets 8% more rep, and this is the type of thing we talk about of, hey, catch-up mechanics being in the game. This is a nice thing to see, where you get 8% more reputation for everything you're doing. But the biggest thing for me is that 50% experience gain. People taking advantage of that to level characters is massive. Feels so good to turn in 3 or 4 quests in your character levels and turn in another 3 or 4 quests in your character levels. You're just like, oh, this feels so good.
Well, plus it's a time walking week, so
yeah.
I mean, granted, we don't know for sure. I mean, this again, the stuff was data mined. Like maybe they don't turn Winds of Sanctuary on, but yeah. I mean, we at the moment as we're recording this, we have no reason to think that they won't. Yeah. We just don't know for sure, but it was in the data, so yeah, it stinks that we don't get any. I mean, it's an 8% rep bonus, which is like I don't understand why it's 8%, and then it doesn't apply to the only rep that literally everybody needs right now. Like, okay, is what it is. But yeah, if you want to level up some tunes, I mean, if this goes live tomorrow and you have Cataclysm time walking, just do that. Go get some levels. I might have, maybe that's the thing I should do with time walking instead of just grinding out a box that I'm going to throw in the trash. I should level up my DK and DH maybe because I mean. It's going to be fast. That's a huge XP bonus during time walking, which is just mega fast chunks of XP per dungeon completion. So that's cool. Yeah. And I mean, I assume that a bunch of the stuff that we're going to be able to get, like we know there's a lot of cosmetics that are kind of Diablo themed around this. And I assume they're just going to like unlock for transmog. I don't think you're going to do this for character power, but you might be able to get some cool mogs out of this. It seems like, so we'll report back next week once we've actually been able to play around with it a bit.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what all this is about. And yeah, it's been 11 years since Diablo 3 came out, so maybe 11% would have made more Sounds to me. I don't know where the 8 signifies. We'll have to
I don't
find
know.
out.
I don't know what the 8 is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but that's maybe it was an error. I don't know. We'll find out.
We'll find out. All right. The other thing going on is Glowcap Festival. Man, if you have not headed out and visited the Sporagar inside Zangarmarsh, this is a great time to do it. It's going to run on Saturday, May 27th. You head out to Sporagar and you can have fun, helping out the Sporelings heal the Great Mushroom Fishu. Who doesn't like helping out Fishu whenever you can? You gain a whole bunch of reputation with Sporagar for helping them out. It's a fun little event. It was the first event for healers to actually be able to use healing spells to complete something, which felt really cool to have that in the game, because everything up to that point was just, hey, healers, go a DPS spec, and then you can actually participate in outdoor world events.
Yeah, this is the Healer Flex micro holiday, and hey, you can get 8% more Sporagar rep. So there you go.
Oh my god, it's true. It's true. Only the Niflheim, not Niflheim. Oh my god, I thought it's a Niflheim because I drifted into Diablo world. Only the Loam Niffin are the ones who cannot not actually get that 8%. I don't know.
They're just not impressed. They're like, we don't care. But the Sporagar are going to be like, this is amazing.
Yes.
Like, you deserve more rep.
You deserve more rep. Hot fixes, obviously a few class changes and updates that needed to happened. That's what we expect typically. They fixed an issue for monks where weapons of order to incorrectly increase enemy damage taken from the trinket and embellishment effects. You shouldn't be making a trinket that hits something for 140,000 suddenly hit something for 250,000. That's just not a thing. You shouldn't be doing that. So corrected. As well as some other issues with enhancement and demonology. So be sure to check those out if there's something you've been suffering from in those specs. Raids, I mean, we expected to see more fixes come through. We saw more fixes come through. We didn't see tuning happen this week with raids, which is also not surprising. Typically, when you get into these early weeks of raid, we go a couple more weeks before we see the next round of tuning and changes happen. So in this case, they fixed an issue in many cases preventing flight stones from dropping in normal and heroic dungeons off bosses on Avarice on all difficulties. Yes, that needs to get fixed. So we're glad to see that get fixed. They fixed an issue that was causing too many bonus flight stones to be awarded when a player in the group increases their M+ rating. This didn't need to get fixed. This was fine. We could have just had people get extra flight stones. That's fine. Although,
I'm usually like hard capped on them anyway. But maybe not anymore. Maybe I was getting too many extra ones.
Maybe you were getting too many extra ones. In Avarice itself, we did see they fixed an issue where Rashok can sometimes not jump to the target player's location during Searing Slam. This is something we'll actually talk about later in this episode because we have the boss guides for the latest wing. So we'll talk about Rashok a little bit and that particular leap that he does. And they also fixed an issue where Voracious Magnaworms could not be attacked. That's irritating. I mean, you get stuck in combat with them and you can't kill them. That sucks. So yeah, that's fixed.
I think those are the trash before Magmarax, which are like, you could imagine what a Voracious Magmaworm looks like if you haven't been down there. But like you're on this kind of circular platform that's surrounded by lava, and they're like out in the lava. It's already kind of the most annoying trash in the whole place. Which the trash in there isn't that bad, but not being able to attack that stuff would be even worse. I didn't run into that, but it sounds bad. I'm glad we didn't see any tuning because I think at the moment we don't really need any tuning, and I'm afraid if they do any tuning, it's going to be buffs, not nerfs. So we can hold off on the raid tuning for a couple weeks here, I think.
Yeah. They did something different with Zeralek Cavern as far as rares go. The loot lockout now resets when the content in a given area of the map becomes available. Now, when world quests are visible in an area, the rare elite enemies in that area will also become available. Rare elite rewards have been increased to offset their reduced frequency. So what they sort of add to this is, unlike Forbidden Reach, the rare elites in Zeralek Cavern are meant to be a bonus rather than a primary activity. So in other words, you can kill the rares once every round of quests that happen inside that, whether that's every 16 hours or every 24 hours. You can actually kill the rares and get rewards in that window of time once, as opposed to, hey, anytime they're up, you can just get in there and knock them down and see what you get. So, that's just a change up for folks if they were wondering what was going on with it.
I think it's okay. Some people might not think so, because if you're like an outdoor player, maybe that's what you want to do is just grind this stuff. I feel like you're probably running into diminishing returns hard anyway, but like if it's up, you're like, well, I could get something if I kill it. It's probably better not to encourage that kind of thing. And I mean, like they said, it's not supposed to be the primary activity. So that's why they want it to work. Like it makes sense to me. I haven't really been doing any of this stuff at all. I think I got the achievement for doing the different encounters like the first week or so, and then I kind of just go there and do world quests and
Right.
whatever else I need to do outdoors, and then call it a day. So I don't get too involved in it, but I think the logic makes sense. It's just like if you were already in like a 3 week pattern here now of like you just grind Zaralik Cavern all day, that might kind of suck. But I think overall it's probably better to discourage that if that's not the intention. If they want you doing other stuff and not just like grinding every rare or event spawn, then that's probably that's the biggest way to de-incentivize it, right? Is to be like, well, you get loot from it once.
Yeah. Yeah, so the other thing that they added in here at the tail end of the notes that we want to cover is characters who have completed Moving On, the quest chain, will be able to start Keeper of the Ossuary on their alts if their alts are level 70. Alts will not have to complete the Azure Span introduction to gain access to the Blue Dragonflight quest. In other words, they are starting to look at, hey, how do we make this expansion more alt-friendly from a questing perspective, so people don't feel like they have to go through quite as much rigmarole to get the character progressed along the lines that they want to be progressed along. So nice to see. I'm glad that they're starting to add this stuff in because they need to for people who actually want to play alt characters. There's definitely quest rewards or quest chains that you want to complete that sort of have chapter headers, and you don't necessarily want to do all the stuff that leads up to it. So it's nice to see them cutting that stuff down.
Yeah, it's tough because there's a lot of different like branching quests and stuff that unlocks other stuff, and it can be maybe hard to funnel people into the correct stuff. But yeah, it's nice when they get out in front of that stuff right away, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questing that is available as of this week, so it can be kind of hard to navigate if you're playing multiple characters through that stuff.
Yeah. The other quest thing we wanted to highlight was a blog post that came out about the Embers of Neltharion campaign, because everyone's kind of like, I killed Scalemander Sarkareth. Where's the last chunk of the quest? What's going on with this? So we got Kyvax, who said, just so we're really clear, the final chapter of Embers of Neltharion questline will open up to all players regardless of their personal raid progression when Scale Commander Sarkareth becomes available in Raid Finder. The story is related to the end of the raid, so in order for players to see that content as intended, we've made two possible requirements for the quest to be given. Either this week you must have killed Sarkareth, or those who do not raid, the last chapter will open to you the same week as the last boss in Raid Finder, as Raid Finder wings open. So this way they're able to deliver the content without spoiling it for players who want to experience it chronologically. I get this. I really do. I think that this makes sense from hey, we are trying to make sure everyone has an equal chance to actually experience the content themselves before the internet is flooded with videos and everything else as to how the storyline wraps up. I also feel like because of the Raid Finder timeline, this is too far out. This is one of those really good ideas on paper, but having to wait until the last week of Raid Finder comes out is also one of those awkward things of, okay, this is, so many weeks away. Is this really something that we want everyone to wait to find out after they've been killing this boss over and over and over again for a bunch of weeks? Because people's, I guess, investment in what's happening in the story does drop off over that time, right? So it's a tricky one. I understand from the perspective of, hey, this is cool, everyone can experience the thing without spoilers at the same time. I also question how long it's going to take for all the Raid Finder wings to come out for this to unlock. So it's that back and forth.
Well, we're like a week earlier on the Raid Finder unlock schedule, yeah. Right? So that helps. This might be controversial, but I think this is good because it benefits raiders. And it's incentive to raid. If you want to see the end of Sarkareth's story and the future of the Black Dragonflight, then go kill Sarkareth. Go do it on normal mode. Find a team, pug your way through, whatever. I think Sarkareth is probably puggable as long as everybody knows what to do. Like, it is not an end. It's not even a Razageth level complexity end boss. It's doable. So yeah, I mean, I think it's cool to have little bonuses for raiders to maybe have, I mean, set tokens dropping from raid bosses is kind of a similar concept, just in terms of
Sure.
character power
Yeah.
and so the story unlocks. So, um, I think that like what they did with this, I think is cool because the end raid cinematic, the IGC, is kind of whatever. It's like fine, but it's really not much of anything. You kind of just see, Sarkareth sort of, die. Spoiler: we kill the bad guy, and there's a little conversation, and then fade to black, and then you're out looting. The actual sort of end of the raid story is through this quest line, and you sort of revisit Aberrus, like you go inside it in this scenario with Rathian and Sibelian, and it's really cool. Like I love the way they did it. I thought it was a great sort of epilogue to the raid, and a really interesting way to approach it. And it unlocks a whole bunch of other questing centered around the Blue Dragon flight after you get back to Valdrakken. So I think what they did with it is very cool. It's very high level in terms of production value for the questing that you're doing. And it's a nice little bonus if you're somebody who is out there raiding and killing the bosses. And if you don't want to just like look it up on the internet or whatever, then you got to wait a couple weeks, and then you can either do Raid Finder if you want to see that first and kind of go through, or you can do the questing once it just globally unlocks. I think it's okay. I mean, it's only going to be a couple weeks from here if you haven't done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's June 22nd.
Is that when? Okay, yeah. I thought. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's not terrible. Again, like that could be incentive to try to get into some organized raiding. Normal raid is very accessible, so
I agree with that entirely. That I like the incentive. I circle back to the Ben and John comment I made earlier in my head of gating storyline like this behind raiding content. Yeah. This means that people who don't have a raid team or who aren't able to raid get up to this point in the storyline without actually needing to raid, and then go, oh, I have to wait to read the final chapter for another month from now until I can actually see how the story resolves by waiting for LFR to release on this release schedule. Or, as you said, try to find a raid team that will actually bring this person along who does not like to raid and doesn't really want to be there, so that they can find out what happens at the end of the story. Right? That's the unfortunate thing about all this. I would hope it works as an incentive. I feel like this pushes players who they even admit don't raid, right? That isn't what they play the game for, into having to do that to resolve the story. Like in the post they say players who don't raid, and you're like, okay, well, if you know they exist, maybe there should be a different way to get through this.
I wonder if like players that don't raid really care about the chronology of like, okay, I defeated the raid boss, and then I see like the raid IGC, and then I do the follow-up questing. Right. Like, I don't know. Do they care? Probably not, because if they're not raiding in any way, shape, or form, then they're never going to see the raid IGCs in the game anyway. Well, yeah. I guess you could like talk to an NPC after it all comes out, and then they'll play it for you in the game. But like, yeah. That kind of player is probably watching this stuff on YouTube or whatever anyway. So I don't know. I mean, I doubt it'll have any kind of real impact of like, hey, yeah, let's give normal mode a shot because we want to play through it and see what happens. But
yeah,
I don't know. I guess really, in my opinion, there's no like really good way to do this, because you do want to have like, you don't want to not have any kind of like, I don't know. I consider like the IGCs and the follow-up questing and stuff to be sort of one of the rewards of doing the raid, right? Like it's not as impactful to your character's gear, but it is part of why you do it.
Yeah.
So like, I don't want to not have anything for that. Yeah, I don't know. This is an approach I don't really remember them having tried before. So I guess we'll see how people feel about it. I think it's okay. I think it would be a different story if Sark was like a much higher bar and a harder boss in general. I would probably that might alter my feelings about it a bit, but considering how accessible this raid is in terms of difficulty and complexity, like I feel like it's appropriate. But we'll see how people feel about it over the next couple weeks here.
I'm with you that I like the incentive. I like that this pushes players to consider, hey, you know what, I'll try out raiding. Let's see how this goes. or my friend has this raid team and they've, keep offering me a spot on the raid team and I keep saying no because I just don't think it's my thing or I don't think I'm good enough or whatever it is. And maybe this is the push that they need to actually get them into doing it. And I think that's great. And I think there will be players that happens with. I find it kind of pointed that they openly admit in the post players who don't raid are going to have to wait for this. And you're like, yeah, so you're openly admitting that you are trying to incentivize a group of players who do not want to do the thing that you're trying to incentivize them to do. So it's, it's a struggle in the sense that I feel for the players, like Ben and John, who don't do raiding for story. They want to just do the story and enjoy the story of the game. And this is Blizzard coming out specifically saying, hey, we're making this change so that you cannot experience the story in our game until you've done this raid thing, right? You're like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll just not play the game for the next month until this thing comes out, and then I'll struggle bust my way through it for those, 3, 4, 5, maybe 8 attempts that it takes as we get determination high enough to actually kill it, and then I'll be able to see the thing that I want to see, right? And it ends up being an unfun experience to get that unlock is the concern, right? That I sort of have when I see stuff like this. So,
well, I don't think you have to do LFR to unlock it. Like, I think once LFR is open, then I think it.
Okay.
Right now you have to kill the boss, right? But I think what Randy is saying is that once LFR is open, then the quest change is there. So you can choose to do it first if you want to, but if you don't want to bother, you just do the quest then. So like I said, I don't ever remember them approaching this kind of problem with something like this. Like there's a lot of facets to this that make it a bit different. So. I don't know. Maybe people go, you know what, that was actually okay. I didn't mind how it rolled out, and if I wanted to see it earlier, I would have done the raid. But I saw it before the next chunk came out, so that's all I care about.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. We'll see. I guess once it's all out there.
Yeah. Okay. Those who are jealous and playing Wrath Classic about the potential 50% experience buff that we're going to be getting on live game are getting their own. The Joyous Journeys 50% experience buff is going to be returning. It's going to be active from May 23rd until June 19th. So if you're someone who wants to level up to 80 nice and quick on Wrath, you can do that with the 50% experience buff that's going to be happening. So just a similar, hey, if we're going to do it at live game, might as well throw it up there on Classic for folks, I guess. So you get a chance to see it too.
Yeah. Call of the Crusades coming out soonish. So this is, get level up for that, or get, another tune, in the roster ready for Grand Crusader and all that. Luckily, there's nothing else going on in the Wrath Classic space to mention, so have a great time, everyone.
Oh boy.
That's a joke. I'm aware, and we're not going to get into that.
Nope.
Maybe listen to Josh Corbett about that if you want to hear some thoughts on WoW tokens in Wrath Classic.
Yep. That was I saw him tweet about the show that he was sitting down and talking to listeners about yesterday or day before. So yeah, I'm sure if you want to know more about that, go visit Countdown to Classic with Josh, because he's got a good chunk of people and opinions and thoughts on that whole thing. I always find that I end up on a weird side of that conversation. We don't always agree on things, and I think it's neat to see the perspective of someone who is full-time into that. So it's always good to bring them in. All right. We're going to talk about the Fury of the Giants, which is essentially Avarice Wing 2 of bosses that we're going to be getting into. So the Assault of the Zakali are the first ones we're going to be talking about, and this is led by Warlord Cagney. The Zakali Warband has launched an all-out assault against the Shadow Crucible in search of their missing elder Rashok. Brutal and ruthless, Cagney, these are all great names, is willing to employ any tactic to succeed. And I say that because all these names are things I can pronounce, because they're not like 9 syllables with consonants backing onto each other. All right. Man, Jason, how about you go through room layout and tank stuff?
Yes, Warlord Cagney, not to be confused with Warlord Magni. Magni's not really a warlord, but
no.
So basically, the layout for this is you're sort of you're fighting the boss in front of these big like chamber doors, and there's these like battlements. You're up on top of this tower kind of thing as you come out onto this, like a balcony sort of thing, and there's these like battlements sticking out of the wall. So it's a 2-phase fight, and in the first phase, you're fighting the boss, and with like a smattering of adds the boss will jump between 2 different platforms on the wall. And so you need to split the group in half and half goes to the one platform, the far one, and half goes to the near one. And then after the boss hits like 25% health, then he jumps back to the middle, he heals up a bit, and then you fight him in front of the door that they're trying to breach to get to their elder. So that's sort of the ebb and flow of the fight. It's two phases that are certainly distinct but pretty similar. Like this is what I like to call a do rating fight. Like you could walk into this cold, like not even really knowing what's happening. And like, if you have a decent raid vocabulary, because you've done a few bosses in your day, like what's happening will be pretty apparent, I feel like, which is good. It's not a complaint. I'm not casting judgment on this fight as such, but one thing to know, again, like the whole sort of story of the fight, the hook here is that they're trying to break this door down. So the door is like on your left as you walk into the room, and then it's on the opposite side from where the platforms are that you fight on. Ads will be climbing up the walls and trying to get at the door to try to break it down. And if they manage to get in range and attack it, it does Shadow Flame damage to the raid and leaves us a stacking Shadow Flame dot on everyone. So you don't want them to do that. Phase one, you got to make sure you're rounding everything up and not letting it get to the door and killing it all. It does take a while. It's a pretty long run, so you have time. You just got to make sure that the door stays healthy, or you're probably going to die. Also, if you're doing it on heroic and higher, that dot never wears off. So have fun with that. Make sure you're taunting ads and redirecting them and stuff.
You have to be sure you're on top of that. Okay, let's go through some abilities. Devastating Jump. All right, this is where essentially Cagney jumps on the other platform at full energy. So he has an energy bar. That energy bar moves up. As he hits full energy, he's going to do a leap. And a circle indicates where he's going to land. And players who are hit by it are knocked back and take massive damage. So essentially, you want to move out of the leap and dodge the fissures that happen afterwards. So when he lands and impacts on the brown swirly that happens on the ground, a bunch of spikes shoot out in various directions, like 6 or 7 lines of spikes, and you just don't want to be standing in the lines of spikes. So pay attention to where the swirly is, and then step out of the lines as the smaller swirlies appear for where the lines are going to be jutting out from them.
Yeah, and I think he always lands like dead center of the platform that he's jumping to. So that kind of helps. Like, just don't hang out in the dead center of the platform, especially if it's jump time.
Yeah.
If he's already there, then you can. But, if he's jumping, don't hang out in the middle. And then, be aware. Yeah. Be aware if he's coming back to your side. So it's not really that, this is called out pretty obviously. It takes him a while to get over there. It's a big call out on the ground. So, just watch out for that.
And he's also doing Heavy Cudgel, which is the frontal slam that you just don't want to be standing in. So I've seen tanks take him right to the edge of the platform and essentially slam into nothingness behind them, as opposed to risking slamming everyone on the platform when he does this. But this does increase physical damage taken, which obviously Jason probably contributes towards tank swapping that happens around here.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, you can't really swap him in phase one, but you have to be aware that the damage is going to ramp up on you a bit. Yeah. So you may need to use like increasingly large buttons until it's time for him to jump away. The cone it's not super wide, but you're fighting on like a circular platform, so you do have to be careful with positioning on it, point it away from the group or something, everybody needs to be aware that that's going to happen. Yeah. An important thing to note here is that, when the boss is on your side and is casting Heavy Cudgel, that cave rubble is going to be falling from the ceiling.
Yep.
And so, they do like 6-yard, impact zones, which you don't want to get hit with, but then there's a rock on the ground. And you can pick up the rock and you can run it to the edge of the platform and you can throw it on an ad that's trying to climb up the wall and break the door down. Those Zakali wall climber ads. So that's the thing to do, because that's going to save you a lot more trouble than whatever uptime you're losing by, peeling off the boss for a second. It might seem a little weird at first, but it's pretty obvious once you have a rock in your hand, because there'll be like an arrow in the game world, like directing you towards where to go to throw it. And then
you don't have to aim the rock either. You just drop it. So you just position your character above it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty simple to do. So make sure you're doing that if the boss is on your side. If the boss is not on your side, you will not have heavy cudgels. Therefore, you will not have cave rubble. Therefore, you will not be throwing rocks onto the wall climbers. But the boss will be on your side eventually, and then make sure that you do that when the boss is on your side.
Yeah. All right. The other thing we got going on is Molten Barrier, where occasionally the boss will put up a big barrier on himself. It's a big fiery one, and will pulse damage to the entire raid until you break through this shield. So you have to be sure you're breaking that shield.
Yeah, this is on the Magma Mystic ads. Actually, it's not. It's not on the boss himself. So I think. I mean, I always end up on the side that doesn't have the boss to start, and I always have a Magma Mystic to start. I'm not sure if a Magma Mystic is on both sides to start, or if one spawns later, like around the time the boss is jumping away. Magma Mystics are mega high priority. It is the thing you should be single targeting and blasting. The boss can get cleaved or whatever. If there's a Magma Mystic out, it needs to die because it's going to be doing a lot of damage to everybody and ramping. So just make sure everybody knows that they need to focus that target and make it go away. You need to break that the Molten Empowerment shield, and then you can there's an interruptible cast and some stuff like that. So you can start managing it once you get that shield broken, but you got to get that shield down. Molten Barrier stinks. You don't want that. So make sure to tell everybody, no, just like blind AoE, like Magma Mystics need to die.
Yeah. We also have Blazing Spear, where basically a huntsman marks a player and throws a spear at them, and the spear is airborne for a few seconds. So basically you get a red circle around you with one of those chevrons over your head, and you sort of move out of the raid group and find a good position to stand where you're not going to be overlapping with people. You can overlap with the other circles, but obviously not with people. And the circle will go away and you'll get a red swirly, and you basically run out of that red swirly as fast as you possibly can because the spear is going to impact there, and after a few seconds it's going to explode. So once your circle stops being a circle and starts being a big swirly, get out of it, and then you'll be fine to avoid the damage coming from the blazing spear as it explodes. Next up, go ahead. You got something?
Yeah, I mean, these guys just like they're lower priority targets. Like, yes, obviously don't blow up your friends with the 6-yard, spears, but they can be kind of cleaved down with the Mystic and or the boss. Like they're lower priority.
And then last but not least, we got the Arbalest Fire, where projectiles are constantly fired on the platform, dealing damage to any player's hit. So you're just avoiding more red swirlies. There's just lots of red swirlies, and you don't stand in any of them because none of them are good. So avoid the stuff as much as you can.
Yeah, you do have. There's Obsidian Guards as well, which is the final class of ads.
Just dealing damage to people with the roar.
Yeah, they just there's nothing you can do about it. It's a 25-yard AoE, which like everybody on the platform is probably going to be within range of that just about. It's a fire dot. They do have a wrinkle on heroic. If you're doing the higher difficulties, they have volcanic shield, which is it's like a lava beam, a magma beam toward the target. So just don't be in the path of those beams. It's slightly more dangerous, but it's there's not. This sounds maybe like more than it actually feels like. There's really not a lot going on here. You're kind of just like killing mobs and avoiding stuff on the ground.
There's also the Magma Mystics too, which I don't want to forget to mention too, that have Magma Flow, which is a dot that they essentially apply to people, and you can dispel it. So be sure you're healing people up, you get that, and you're dispelling that and dealing with it when you can. Yeah,
true. Yeah, especially on higher difficulties, like that could be kind of nasty. So yeah. I mean, there are many reasons why the Magma Mystics are your priority targets, even if the boss is on your side.
And so as you mentioned, when Cagney drops below 25% health, we get into phase 2, where he goes to the door between both platforms and the ad stops spawning, and basically he heals himself to 35% health because you don't want him to start in execute range. That would just be too easy. And you soak his attacks against the door and finish him. So essentially we get into Catastrophic Slam, where basically when he reaches 100 energy, he casts a shockwave towards the door that must be soaked and split basically the damage. And basically you burn up his energy when he's doing it. So if not enough players actually soak this, he kills the raid. This sounds very familiar, Jason, to a particular boss inside of a particular raid from last expansion in Castle Nathria. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too dissimilar.
Yeah.
I mean, this is it's called out pretty well. It's because you got the big like beige swirly with the Kill Jaden spike on the door when he goes to do that. So yeah, just make sure you have people in it. I mean, the thing is, you have like the cudgel cone. It's now a flaming cudgel.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to like point that away from the group, but then you need to like funnel everybody towards the door for the soak. One thing to note is that the flaming cudgel tank hit is now also going to set everybody on fire.
Right.
And then they're going to explode in a 6-yard splash. So when the tank mechanic's going out, everybody's got a range 6. And I think this is actually the most dangerous part of the fight in my experience. This is where I tend to lose people because either they're too close to each other or the hit's just like too big and healers didn't have stuff ready to go.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, the thing with phase 2, and you should probably hero Bloodlust here. I think this is like the spot where you really want to kill the boss. You could get through phase 1 faster if you do it off the pole, but like you want to get through phase 2 faster. Phase 1 is just kind of filler.
Well, you definitely want phase 2 faster because when he actually enters phase 2, he just starts pulsing damage that just hits the raid consistently through the entire phase. So yeah, you definitely want to burn through
nothing you can do
faster.
about the pulse. Yeah. So I mean, that's what I've been doing, and to me it seems preferable. I don't really care how fast I get through phase 1. Ultimately. But yeah, so just keep that in mind. Like the tank hit is also a raid hit essentially. So just be prepared for that. And other than that, I mean, that's really the fight. The wrinkle with heroic is you get debuffed when you soak the door slam, the catastrophic slam. So you just need to rotate. You can't take 2 in a row, but you could take every other one. So you're going to split the group anyway to go to the 2 different platforms. So just call, one platform to soak first and the other platform to soak second, and then just alternate. It obviously hurts a bit more. It's heroic, so it's scaled up, and then you'll have fewer players soaking it, but it should be manageable if you are this far into the raid to begin with, I think. So yeah, it's really it's kind of minor changes, I would say, going from normal to heroic. I didn't really notice too much of a difference, to be honest. Like I knew it was different, but in practice it kind of feels the same. This is a boss that on normal mode we pulled on opening night. Like my co-tank didn't even realize he was pulling the boss, and I didn't even get anything set up or explain it, and we just killed it anyway.
Yeah.
Our groups were split from amalgamation, and I said, okay, odd group go over here, even group come over here, and we go, and it just died. Like I don't want to make anybody feel bad if you're struggling with this boss for some reason, or if you don't like have immediate success with it, but it's just not complex, right? If you wander into ground effects or something, like you're going to die. And if you don't manage the door mechanic properly, you're going to die 100%. And then you don't win the fight. But this isn't really asking a whole lot of you here, in my opinion. This is a pretty straightforward fight. I like the atmosphere of it. Like I like the idea of, these Jaredins are trying to, climb up the walls of Aberrus and like break into this chamber and break out their elder and get their revenge or whatever. Like super cool theming. Like it is kind of epic when they start all climbing up the walls and you got to round them all up. But it's really not a high execution bar here. It's a cool fight. I mean, I think it's got a lot of personality, but it should be pretty doable.
Yeah. All right, next boss is Rashok the Elder, the person who they were trying to free in the first place. Basically imprisoned within Aberrus for a millennia. That's a really long time. The Zukali Elder Rashok has been perpetually drained of the raging flame within him to power Neltharion's twisted laboratory. Existing on the edge of death for so long has driven the Elder mad. Should he break free, his vengeance will scour the Shadow Crucible's halls. So yeah, he's not someone you want to let out, but he's also like, he's been locked up and drained for a millennia. Like, man, I feel for him, right? He's one of those villains you can relate to, because it's like, God, that's terrible.
So I feel at work every day, just being drained.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a millennia is not that long in WoW time. I was expecting the Dungeon Journal to say he's in prison for 10,000 years.
10,000 years,
he only got like a tenth of that, so like that's not that bad, I guess. But yeah, it is kind of funny because like we cannot let the Zukali open this door under any circumstances. Then we kill him and we just go right inside. But It's a lot better if we do it because we got to get in there and kill him because he's got loot.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's what it is, right? It's clearly over this millennia, he's just been accumulating a loot hoard inside of the space. So we just need to start emptying that out. So that's why we're going in. Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about the shape of the room and tank mechanics, and then we'll dive into
Yeah,
stuff.
so the room is like circular-ish, I would say. It's mostly a big circle, and positioning is somewhat important here because there's area denial. So you want to kind of start off to one side and then have sort of a clear direction of where traffic is supposed to go and like where you are going to go with the boss. And then there is a mechanic in the dead center of the room that you need to utilize and move the boss into at certain intervals. So positioning is important, but not very complex. You just need to know that. You need to have a plan for where Searing Slam is going to go, and you need to know that after Shadow Lava Blast, you need to drag the boss into the middle of the room. And if you do that, then you have mastered the positioning requirements of Rashok that you can control at least.
Well, and we're also going to emphasize you do not want to drag him in the middle of the room when he has not finished doing his energy cap out.
That's true. Yes.
Because
don't do it early. Yeah.
He will essentially kill your entire raid team if you do it 2 times in a row too quickly. So there's definitely some movement where it's like, hey, there's some very strong, hard rules about this, but they're not hard to follow, is what this comes down to. So starting off, Searing Slam, as you mentioned, area denial. He's going to target a player, and then he's going to jump to that player and slam the player into the ground, and essentially drop the best way to put it is an orb of lava that's melting in a pool below it. And when it does this, it also sort of releases a small waves of lava that travel through the entire room from it and all of the previous ones that have been placed. So basically, you you need to pick a wall and take this over towards that wall and line the wall with these, and then have the entire raid dodge stuff that doesn't get soaked up when you get hit by it. These waves don't essentially have a situation where a player can like use a hand of protection and then just run through a bunch of them and make them all disappear and the whole raid can ignore them. They travel and just keep traveling. So if they hit you, they just go through you and go to the next person, and they do a bunch of damage to you. So there's a lot of like, hey, heads up, Searing Slam's about to happen. Get out of the raid group to the, star marker or whatever marker you choose for it. He leaps and slams on that person. Everyone dodge, right? Stop what you're doing. Pay attention to dodging. Everyone dodge is what this sort of comes down to. You dodge all the little lava waves that come out, and you can essentially move on to the next mechanic.
Yeah, one thing to note with Searing Slam is that you do not want Rashok to Searing Slam on top of an existing lava vortex.
Yeah.
Because that will result in deaths, if not an outright full wipe. Of course, like the first time we pulled this, I explained the whole fight, and the second Searing Slam that went out went directly on top of the previous Searing Slam lava vortex. So, it's one of those things where you just have to see it, I guess. Sometimes, like some players just need to see it because we're used to like, okay, use the space wisely. Put
Venn diagram things. Let's Venn diagram stuff. Don't do that with this.
Yeah, it kind of works against what we know as like general practice of like how to do raid mechanics. So just keep that in mind. Now on normal and Raid Finder, the lava vortexes will shoot out the lava waves only when new Searing Slams get cast and a new lava vortex goes down. So there's not a lot of repositioning you have to do around that mechanic once you're kind of set up. But on Heroic, it's like a periodic pulse that it'll shoot out the lava waves that you have to dodge. So that can get a little trickier as the fight goes on because obviously the longer the boss lives, the more times the boss is going to cast Searing Slam, the more lava vortexes you're going to have, which means more lava waves. So, it's just lava everywhere. Good idea to use Hero Lust at the top and try to keep the fight as short as you possibly can to, counteract the area denial and just the amount of stuff to dodge as the fight proceeds.
Yeah. Next ability we're going to talk about is Charge Smash, where Rashok marks a circle on the ground and smashes it, dealing damage split amongst all players who are in it, and also gains 15 energy. The amount of energy that he gains, and obviously the amount of individual damage people take, is reduced by the more targets that split across. So You want people to move into this circle and stack in this circle to be able to then stop the boss from gaining a whole bunch of energy and reduce someone from getting one shot by it. So be sure you get into the charge smash when that's going on.
Yeah, this is your meteor soak. It's usually it's a lot like amalgamation, where the fire dude or shadow flame dude has the meteor soak that goes like right near the boss. This is similar to that. It seems like in terms of positioning, and more is better. You want to have basically everybody in there if you possibly can. And really, there's no reason to be too spread out, because that probably means you're close to a lava vortex that's shooting lava waves out. So yeah, just keep that in mind. This is a big split soak. Make sure you get as many people in there as you can, and you want to keep the damage manageable, and you want to keep his energy as low as you possibly can, because that gives you more time to complete the fight.
Yeah. Next ability we're going to talk about is Doom Flames, which actually probably has one of the coolest graphical effects I've seen in the game in a long time. It's just cool. So it wouldn't be a boss fight, it wouldn't be a raid here, I guess, without having at least Sargeras spikes somewhere in it. So this is the Sargeras spikes mechanic, where essentially he calls down a wave of projectiles that people need to soak. You're going to have a whole bunch, like probably 15 or 20 circles appear, and people have to spread out and get into these circles that have very large Sargeras spikes in them. So when you actually move into that Sargeras spike, it goes away, so you know if that's been soaked. You soak these things, and then like the raddest looking fireball with a purple flame trail from Shadow Flame falls down from the sky and hits you. I love whoever designed this ability. I want it to be an ability where you could cast, like, I want a Shadow Flame Rain of Fire is that Warlocks can cast. That's what I want, just so that we can have cool looking graphical effects, man.
The Shadow Flame VFX in this raid are awesome. Like they're so eye catching. They look great. Yeah. I think lore wise, like having a player class manipulate Shadow Flame is a little fraught, shall we say? But then again, we're getting Light Forged Warlocks, so does anything matter anymore? I don't know.
True. Yeah.
Maybe not. But this is. I echo what you just said about the way the VFX look. But this is this is like your standard. Okay, there's a bunch of soakies on the ground. Make sure we get one per customer. Soak them up so they don't blow up and kill us. I don't know. I don't know if this like prefers like where the boss's position is, or if they go like somewhat near players. But either way, again, like this is a good reason to keep the raid kind of clumped near the boss, so that you can handle soaks, and then people have clear lanes to get out with the searing slams.
Yeah. Next one is Shadow Lava Blast, where he's basically when he reaches high energy, Rashok will turn towards a player and cast a massive frontal cone. You have to dodge this massive frontal cone because he's going to slam the ground with Shadow Flame, and it does a whole bunch of damage. So, yeah, once he gets higher up on energy, you have to start paying attention to this ability because he'll come online. And remember, he's not going to be in the middle of the room when he's doing these things, so positioning can matter with where your raid is. You can often bait this in a particular direction. That's often helpful. You bait it away from where all of the lava swirls are that sort of explode and erupt, or maybe towards them, depending on what you want to do. But you might want to bait away from them in case someone has an overlap and has to go out there with a circle and they're trying to get back in, and it's a big problem. Anyways, be sure that you're paying attention to overlaps with Shadow Lava Blast, because it can be tricky that way.
Yeah, I find this one is kind of tough with the positioning, because he usually casts it like right after a Searing Slam, so he's sort of like in between where you want him to be and where you definitely don't want him to be.
Right.
And the cone is gigantic. Like it's a wide cone. And again, you're in a circular room, so it's going to start getting, purchase across the room really fast. So
yeah,
again, good reasons to be near the boss, because it'll help you, even if he Searing Slams away, if you were already pretty close to him, like you can probably reposition quickly behind him. And this is also your official notification that it's time to move the boss into the middle. Once Shadow Lava Blast goes out, then his energy is almost full, and you got to start soaking it out, or you're gonna die.
Yeah. Last but not least for this phase, we'll talk about Ancient Fury, which is the actual like, hey, it's gonna wipe you mechanic. When he's getting close to 100 energy, right? Like he's like 95, 96, like he's getting up there on energy. You want to move him to the center of the room, because when he hits 100 energy, he essentially enrages and just starts killing the raid very quickly. And at the center of the room is this conduit, and when he stands on it, it starts draining his energy, and essentially it gets you back down to a point where you can move him off of it and be able to actually deal with mechanics again. But Jason, what happens during this intermission when he hits that 100 energy?
Well, everything starts kind of exploding. It's actually really kind of dangerous. This is like your prototypical like burn phase and keep everybody alive and stack for AoE heals and roll healer cooldowns and everybody do as much damage as you can while the boss is stationary. It's intense, but it's relatively short. Although I'm not a healer, so I I
The
don't
longest times for healers.
probably feels different to a healer, but
Yeah.
it's one of those types of things. So Scorching Heat Wave is just going to be going out, which there's nothing you can do about that. You're just going to be taking damage. On Heroic, it also leaves a dot, or it's a debuff, I guess, called Scorched Flesh, which every time the pulse happens, you take 2% more damage from the next one. So it ramps, so don't like blast and overlap all your raid CDs right when this starts, or you're going to be really hurting by the end. The thing that would be bad enough, and it is bad, but the thing that really makes this part suck is Shadow Flame Fissures, which are lines of orange swirlies that emanate out from the boss, and they're like 5-yard swirlies, and they go out like all over the place. They go out in lines.
Sylvanas like, lines is what they're like.
Yeah, they're kind of like that.
Phase 1 like, Sylvanas lines.
But I think they're like wider, maybe, like because you could get them like 2x2, and you can get them so they can get kind of wide. But they do go out in lines. Like there's plenty of extra space, but the problem might be finding it in time. Also, the boss's hitbox is like just like a yard or two shorter than I ultimately wish it was when I'm doing this. Like I'm trying to hit him, but I also don't want to stand in the fire.
Yeah.
So that can get a little dicey, but just have a plan for it, just know that like, okay, once we're like halfway through or whatever, or a third of the way through, we're going to start rolling healer CDs and go from there. You don't have to like move him out of here. He'll just stand in there until his energy is drained and then he leaves. The thing is, once he's done with that, like he has a decently long debuff that you have to keep him out of there. Like you might think, well, okay, why don't I just like power through this and keep him in the middle the whole time? Then he doesn't do anything else and whatever. But you can't do that because he has a debuff that increases his damage significantly if he goes back on the conduit in a certain amount of time.
By 500%.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So that's enough to just like insta kill you as soon as the pulse goes out, especially if you're on heroic and you're already coming in with debuff stacks. Also, you can only use the conduit a couple times. I think it's on LFR. There's no limit, so you have as much time as you need to basically on LFR. On normal, I think you can use the conduit 3 times and heroic twice. So you have to. That's why you have to wait until his energy gets very high, until he does Shadow Lava Blast, and then you reposition, and you have to use as much of the timer as you can, especially as you're gearing up and kind of progressing through. So just be aware of that. That is a very intense part of the fight, but it is relatively brief. You spend most of the time in the main phase with running the Searing Slams out and soaking the Soakies and repositioning around the area denial. I would say overall, like, this fight is maybe not as bad as we just made it sound like. Like, I thought that this fight would be harder, but as long as you're smart about where Searing Slam goes, it's pretty manageable,
Yeah, and as long as people are good at dodging the waves that come out from Searing Slam, that's I mean, outside of the intermission where it's just intense damage phase, dodging those little waves are what are going to essentially drain your healer's mana and split their attention enough that's going to cause wipes. So
right.
Yeah.
And that's why you want to map by the wall, because then half of them go into the wall, right?
Exactly.
Instead of across the room. Yeah. And plus it's like less area that's being denied for you. So I mean, like what I try to do is like, I'll pull the boss off to one side and kind of position somewhat near the wall and then tell people, okay, go counterclockwise or whatever with your Searing Slam. Just get them out, get them away from the boss and out, to the wall. And that seems to work fine. Like especially in heroic, you are going to have to dodge lava waves like pretty consistently, but they're not that big. And like the room is quite large. You're going to run out of time from the conduit before you're going to run out of space for the area denial. So I feel like anyway, I feel like if you're in danger of not having anywhere to put your Searing Slams, then you're probably in significant trouble with the DPS check anyway. I mean, that's pretty much the boss. It's a cool fight. I mean, visually it looks awesome. And the mechanics are. I think the mechanics read well. They're pretty fun to deal with. I was expecting this boss to be a bummer, like Searing Slam, the area denial, we can't handle this, but it just kind of died. Like it, we had the plan, we executed the plan, the boss died. Very rewarding. That's what we like when we do a raid boss.
Yeah, it's funny because you thought that fight was about area denial. Wait till you get to the next one that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, really.
It's the entire fight for the next one that we're going to be chatting about is about area denial and having space in the room, basically. So we'll move on to the Vigilant Steward Ziskarn. Man, it's the first name I struggle with. Long ago, Ziskarn was tasked with testing the metal of Neltharion's experiments. Only the most powerful would pass muster and keep their lives. The latest visitors to the Shadow Crucible have attracted his unwavering attention, but his approval will be much harder to earn. So this, Jason, it's an aerial denial boss, but how about you talk about the room shape, tank stuff, and then we'll move into the mechanicals.
Yeah, I don't think that we are going to earn Ziskarn's approval.
I don't think so.
I don't think that happens.
No.
But yeah, the room is circular, I think. Broadly, I would say it's circular from memory. I'm not looking at a map right now, but it's like a big circle, and on the floor are all of these little like vent looking things, just every 8 yards or so, 6 yards or so, just dotting the entire floor. The room it looks like it's on a platform, and there's this like fiery barrier around it, and it looks like that might be dangerous, but it's not. There's a hard wall around the room. You cannot get knocked off of the platform through the wall. The wall does not hurt you, even though it looks like it's fire. So keep that in mind. That is important for positioning and for managing the knockback, because you don't have to work as hard as maybe it visually looks like you do. Like you are not in danger if you're along the wall from the existence of the wall or the knockback itself. There might be other dangerous things, but you can use the wall to your advantage. So just something to keep in mind about overall about, how the room looks. Oh, you know what? I just realized we didn't talk about the tank combo on Rashok, which is maybe that's worth mentioning before we get too far into Vigilant Steward, because Rashok does probably have the most punishing tank mechanic.
Okay, sure. Circle back. We're circling back to the last boss, everybody. Though.
Sorry. Oh, just totally. We got in the weeds with the positioning, but Rashok has your tank combo. I have a basket of 3 abilities among 2 different things. I'm going to pick from them and cast them at you. We see a couple bosses like this a tier, I feel like, or at least once. So he's got Flaming Slash, which is fire damage, and Earthen Crush, which is physical damage. And each time you take one, you then take 500% from the next Flaming Slash or Earthen Crush if you've taken one. So you can take one of each safely, but then if he casts 2 in a row, you have to swap there. So
reactionary tanking.
Yeah, just make sure. It can be kind of tough because he usually casts it while other stuff is going on. And I found myself trying to multitask and I'm soaking a Doom Flame. Oh, my other tank's dead because I was too far away or whatever. I was too busy looking at positioning to taunt swap at the right time.
Right.
Or sometimes it's I taunted during the cast, which meant that then I put myself in trouble because he switched targets during the cast. Not all boss abilities work like that, but these abilities will switch during the cast, so keep that in mind. You cannot pre-taunt and then get the cast where you want it to go.
Right.
That has gotten me in trouble as well with this boss. You just have to make sure that your tanks are communicating. I mean, there's no cone or anything, so you can kind of put them wherever, and tanks can stand wherever in relation to each other. But one tank cannot take the same ability more than twice,
right,
or more than once in the sequence without an immunity or something. So keep that in mind. With everything else going on around you, it can be easy to miss. I've missed it, and my co-tank has missed it, and we've had tank deaths on this boss because of the combo. Because it's not at our current gear levels, it's not survivable other than unless you're bubbling. So, keep it in mind. Work it out. Make sure that you got good taunt set up, and do not pre-taunt. Wait for the thing to cast, and then you got that 2-second window to hit it.
Yeah. Okay, Jason, bouncing back to Vigilant Steward. What are we doing tank-wise for this?
So, a very important mechanic that's going to dictate your positioning is Dragonfire traps.
Mm-hmm.
Those vents I was talking about, periodically Ziskarn is going to activate the two closest to it. And they are going to ignite with fire. They're like 10-yard fire circles. And they will leave a stacking dot on you for standing in the trap. So when you see the Dragonfire trap cast go out, you have to reposition. You know, a good thing to do is try to get Ziskarn like on, like not quite on top of one, so that it's like near, you know, it's like right behind the one that you're like standing at, and then it's close to another one that's right behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not entirely dissimilar from positioning. I already forgot the second to last boss's name of Vault. The egg boss in Vault. It's not entirely different than positioning her near the eggs that you wanted to light up. But it's way less complicated.
I mean, this is two circles that overlap in a Venn diagram, and you want to be in the cleavage of those two circles, is what you're talking about.
You want the boss to be in there, yeah. You don't want to be in there, but you want the boss set up like in between two traps.
So you can
basically
be in the divot between the two circles when you're positioning your tank. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want him to be right in the middle between them.
Yeah. Or even like offset just a little bit so that you can quickly get out of the one that's closer to you. I like to set the boss up kind of along the wall. Initially, what we were doing with this boss is saying, oh, we're going to go clockwise or we're going to go counterclockwise. It doesn't really work because you have to position too much. I think having like a rigid positioning plan is probably going to work against you as you're learning this fight, because you need to be able to improvise as stuff happens in the room that you can't control. So keep that in mind. The boss will also activate an additional trap that's like in a random position nearby. So that complicates things, but you can't control that. You can only control the two that it's going to do nearest itself. So keep that in mind. And I mean, work out with your co-tank, like, all right, where are we going to go to start, you know, and then you can kind of communicate and direct traffic as the room fills up with the fire traps. I find being flexible with it makes it easier to manage than trying to have a rigid plan for like, we always go in this direction.
Right. So yeah, so you've described the Dragonfire traps already, which is that the two closest traps activate, and you don't want to stand in the fire because you get that stacking debuff. Let's talk about golems, because it also activate golems throughout the fight, and these golems will run off and try to activate more traps. So this is a pain in the butt, because basically you can have DPS teams sort of split off to try and kill these things to stop them from activating traps. You can in fact CC them and interrupt them to stop them from actually activating a trap. And the best part about them overall inside a room that's all about area denial is when you kill them, you can then loot the salvageable parts from them, which lets someone get an extra action button to shut down a trap. And when you're shutting down a trap, you don't actually have to like walk into the trap and click on it. You get that extra action button, you stand on the edge of the fire circle, and you can press this button and a beam will come out of you and actually shut down the trap. So the golems are quite helpful in basically, as you're progressing around the room in that direction that Jason was talking about, you're slowly filling it up with traps because the boss is activating them. You're killing the golems and kind of either, if you've had a golem activate a trap in a spot ahead of you that you don't want it to be, you're deactivating that one. Otherwise, you're deactivating the traps behind the boss that sort of free up more space behind you as you sort of move around the room. So it becomes kind of a cyclical thing that you're doing.
Yeah, it's obnoxious because like it's a single target boss, right? Like it's not two bodies or whatever. So you really just want to blast that boss and just get out of here. But you really, at least now, maybe when we're super overpowering, it won't matter. But right now, like you need to focus on the golems. Yeah. You need to get them dead, and you need to use their parts to deactivate the traps. Like you're going to need that space. You are going to have to move around the room in somewhat unpredictable ways, and so clearing paths like through the middle of the room is going to be really important. So you only get so many of these. There's only so many traps you can shut off. So make sure you use them as much as you can. Just try to impress upon the team, like, yeah, like your numbers on the boss or whatever are cool, but if we don't have anywhere to stand, then it's not going to die. Yeah. It's a little wonky from what I understand. I haven't done this part because I'm busy with other stuff, but it seems like looting the golem and getting the item and deactivating the trap is a little mechanically wonky, because I think you have to like target the trap that you want to do, and then the button pops up, and then you click the button, and then you channel the thing.
Yeah, you have to click on the trap. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's not a lot of times stuff like this is just be near this thing and then the button appears and click the button. This is a little bit more complicated than that, but I guess it's good because you can be deliberate about what traps you want to get rid of.
It won't hit the one behind you on your left, and you'll be very frustrated because you were facing the one ahead of you and it didn't work.
But so if you don't have a target, it's not going to do anything. Like, just be aware, of how that kind of works, and again, have a plan for it. Sort of like how you're going to set the boss up and everything. And but it's crucial, I think, for learning the fight that you manage the golems well. Like, first of all, you can't have the golems running around just turning traps on. That's a loss, right? Like, you just lose. And you need to make use of the deactivators for sure. So make sure you're doing that every time, getting people out there, designate people to do it. Maybe if you have people who are a bit better with, doing mechanics and kind of operating the game, so to speak, just have them do it, because you got to make sure that you're shutting the traps off.
Yeah. All right. Next ability we'll talk about is both a big shift for the raid, but also just a lot of damage, is Tactical Destruction, where as the fight's going on, Zaskarn is gaining energy. At 100 energy, Zaskarn will activate 3 of the dragon pillars that are essentially nearby. And these dragon pillars will shoot flames out that basically take up half of the room, whichever half that they're on. If the room's circular, obviously you're talking about half that circle for where those 3 dragon statues are. So you want to be on the other side of the room as these 3 large pulses of fire happen. They aren't happening consecutively. All 3 dragon statues will breathe fire at the same time. And it's basically like pulse, and then pulse, and then pulse, and then that mechanic is done. So you want to be sure you're moving away from the statues that are blowing very obvious large fire on the ground.
Yeah, this is a pretty intense visual effect as the room kind of fills up. I mean, I don't have a ton of experience with this boss yet, but I think the best thing to do is just to haul ass to the opposite side of the room, as far as you can. If it's clear, if you have a path through the traps, just get as far away as you can, and don't try to get too cute with it, because the boss also has a knockback, which we haven't kind of quite gotten to yet. But like, if you're trying to, okay, I'm just going to post up in the middle of the room. I'm going to blink to the middle of the room and just keep shooting the boss while the tanks run away. Well, now you're going to get blast waved back into the tactical destruction and die if that overlaps, right? Like, you don't want that. And then also that starts getting weird for the rest of the mechanics that happen, right? There's other stuff going out in the room that you don't want to be on the opposite side of the room from the rest of the group. So I think it's best for everybody to get over there as fast as they can and be ready for knockbacks and stuff. Tanks got to move kind of quick. Like, we've sort of experimented with kind of setting the boss up more in the middle and letting everybody get away from it, and then the knockback moves everybody away from all the dangerous stuff. The problem with that is you're going to get a Dragonfire trap activation pretty shortly after Tactical Destruction, and you don't want the middle of the room filling up with traps. So I think the best thing to do is just get as far away in a straight line as you can, or even if you can like park on the side, right? Because it does fill up about half of the circle, but there's sort of like a little gap near the middle where you can get on the side, like on the outer edge of it, and be safe. So that's like a good place to set up the boss. If there's already traps down there, you can put the boss kind of on top of or like near existing traps and just sort of start working back around from there. But again, this is what I mean. Like, having a rigid plan for where you're going to position and move the boss can work against you, because when Tactical Destruction comes out, you gotta live, you gotta get away from the fire, and you gotta put the boss somewhere that you can work around from, even if it's not exactly where you wanted to go, or you're not going in the direction you thought you were going to go.
Right. We'll take a moment to talk about Blast Wave, since you mentioned it there, which is basically just a knockback that knocks everyone like 20 yards. So you just want to be sure that you're positioning in a spot where you're not going to get knocked back into fire, or as Jason mentioned, into these, tactical destruction that's going on. Boss just does a pulse. It radiates in all directions out from him. It's not a specific direction. He doesn't target a player. It's just an AoE pulse that knocks everyone back, applies a dot to them, so everyone's taking some ticking damage afterwards. So you got to pay attention to that with the Blast Wave.
And again, you can get knocked into the wall. As long as there's not fire on the floor, you can get knocked into the wall.
Even though the wall's made up of fire, you can get knocked into it.
Right.
That's fine.
It just looks like fire, but it's an optical illusion. Yeah, because I mean, when we were first doing this, like I'm watching people who could just shift over like a little bit, just kind of turn 15 degrees and they get knocked into the wall and barely disrupted, and they're going like putting their back to the dead center of the room and getting pushed way back and potentially into other hazards. And it's like if you're near the wall and the floor's clear, like use the wall, you won't go very far at all.
Yeah. All right. Last ability I want to chat about is Shrapnel Bomb, where basically he regularly drops several bombs in the room. After 30 seconds, they explode and wipe the raid, so they need to be soaked. These do damage when you soak them. So you basically need to either soak them with a tank who's popping up some sort of big old damage absorb, or with someone with an immunity. It's physical damage, so you can throw up an immunity and run through them and feel better and see what happens.
Yeah, these things hurt like hell. They hurt really bad. So definitely, like if you're gonna have people who aren't tanks doing this, then
And a protection.
yeah, you're gonna need buttons. Luckily, Paladin's pretty popular right now, so you might have a couple Paladins in your raid that you can cycle through to pop these.
Hunters can use their turtle to
Yeah,
get through this.
turtle works. Yeah, you can use all kinds of stuff. I mean, all kinds of stuff works, but you got to have a plan. Again, like this boss is all about having a plan, I think, and because you don't want to overlap, right? Like if I bust shield wall and I'm running through bombs while I'm off tanking, I don't want to see a turtle down because then we just wasted a turtle, right?
Exactly.
Like I'm going to have shield wall back up pretty fast. I have a lot of cooldown reduction, but I appreciate it if somebody wants to pop turtle and run over the bombs, and I don't have to do it. But you got to tell me that you're doing it. You know what I mean? Like, so I'll try to ask like, okay, who's got next bombs or whatever. Just try to get somebody to speak up and say that like they have an immunity ready. I kind of like if you have the group comp for it, I think that's preferable to having your tank do it because, you do have the tank swap. The tank swap starts to hurt after a while, and the bombs can go kind of like anywhere. They can go pretty far, and they are kind of hard to see once they land because they don't have VFX around them after they land. There's like beige swirlies in the ground for where they're going to land. And if you're where they land, you don't want to do that either because I think you get stunned or something if they land on you. Like that sucks. You don't want that. So yeah, it can be kind of obnoxious to round them up quickly. You have 30 seconds, but you can't let them explode because then you die. Like everybody dies. So keep that in mind. I think for us, for heroic, this was the thing that was the hardest to manage was sort of the interaction. There's usually bombs going out like right at the same time the second tactical destruction happens, I think. Or maybe it's the second set of bombs happens during the first tactical destruction. You got to be patient unless you have bubble, and then you can just do whatever you want. But if you're not bubble popping the bombs for that, you have to wait till tactical destruction's over. You have plenty of time, but you have to use it wisely. But that interaction in particular was kind of stymieing us as we tried to learn this fight on heroic. I think this is the hardest boss of the first 8 in this raid. If in my experience so far, it was the one that felt like the biggest hill to get over. And even for that, it's not that bad. But yeah, you need as many people on the team as on board as possible with killing the golems, deactivating the traps, and using immunities to pop bombs. Like you need to be doing that, or you will not win.
Yeah. All right, well, that's going to wrap up our review, or at least our walkthrough of this latest wing of Aberrus, the Shadow Crucible. So if you folks enjoyed that, then obviously we'll do another one in a couple of weeks for the next section that we have, and then the last one a couple of weeks after that. If you have enjoyed this episode, and maybe feel free to, give us a 5-star review over on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. We always love getting reviews and reading them here on the air, and we haven't gotten one in a little while. So it means if you submit one, we will read it here on the show, and you can, have your 5-star get read out, and we'll be thrilled, and you help boost us up the charts and help out our show, so we appreciate it when you do it. We also appreciate all of our patrons, and I want to take a moment here to thank our patrons for all they contribute to the show and help us to improve on the content that we create. And I'm going to give a special shout out to Alianas, Arajian, Celian, Kapawi, Max, Shorel. Thank you so much for everything all of our patrons give. We appreciate all of you. And if you're trying to find our Patreon, it's over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. You can hop over there and contribute to our weekly episodes, which lets us, keep paying all of the bills that we have to pay when it comes to keeping the show live and on the air and being produced and all that kind of fun stuff. So thank you so much to everyone who contributes.
Absolutely. Thank you, patrons, so much. I mean, Yeah, we've had a hard time keeping the show on a tight schedule this year, which is a relatively new development. And you know, I I mentioned it last week, and a bunch of patrons just reached out in the Discord and stuff, and had some great, really nice stuff to say. Like we've just been having a hard time, and I've had all kinds of stuff going on, and that makes it we do this because we love the game, we love talking about it, and we feel like we have a responsibility to you, our audience, to have these shows and talk about what's going on in the game and what to do in it and how to play it and what we think about it. The show it's not our job, it's not our livelihood. It's something that we do because we care about it and we care about the audience for it. So that makes it a priority, and patrons help us keep the show on the rails and keep it going. So thank you so much for supporting what we do around here.
Yeah. That's going to wrap up episode 579 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can go over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter at The Starting Zone, or you can join our Discord, as Jason just mentioned there, the startingzone.com/Discord. It's how you find our Discord server. And hop in there and feel free to contribute there as well. If you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/the starting zone. You got designs on shirts and mugs and stickers over there. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
The best place to find me is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. And if you want to send me a Blue Sky invite, you can talk to me over there as well. And you can also find me streaming WoW sometimes on twitch.tv/Shieldwald and even less frequently on youtube.com/Shieldwald. But those channels are out there. My internet has just been like in shambles lately at prime time. It's only like on Tuesday and Wednesday nights when I want to raid and stream. My internet upstream is just non-existent. Any other time of day, any other night of the week, fine. But the exact times I want to use it for raiding and streaming, I've been having terrible problems lately. Last night was okay though. We had a little hiccup, but stream was like a good 4.5 hours. Game felt mostly pretty good, so I'm optimistic that maybe whatever my ISP is doing is maybe wrapping up. I don't know, but we'll try to stream tonight. We're doing Heroic Raid. We'll do some more keys. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Sundays are usually when that happens, but no Sunday this week because we will be doing holiday weekend stuff. So, but yeah, come check out the video channels as well.
Yeah, I will add that we need to get Jason on fiber at some point. So hopefully that happens inside of your neighborhood at some point.
The problem is I live in the absolute darkened heart of Comcast country.
Yeah.
And this is like sort of where that whole evil empire started growing, and they have their icy fingers gripped tightly around my neighborhood. I cannot get anything else.
Yeah.
I have no other options, and I probably never will. So all I can do is hope that they want to play nice more often than not,
or that they choose to actually improve their network up to being something with fiber. But yes, someday.
Yeah, right. That's all I got. That's all I mean, most of the time my service is pretty good, but when I have problems with it, I have severe problems with it, and no recourse, which is awesome.
Well, if you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey. I also have a Twitch channel at twitch.tv/SpencerHD and youtube.com/@SpencerHD. If you want to throw a subscribe over there, feel free. And Jason, I think that's going to wrap us up. So for Jason and myself, I want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.